Back in the 1980s and early 1990s, the North American West, from the Canadian Rockies to the upper Gulf of California, was undergoing a profound change. The historic bedrock of the local economies, from agriculture to mining, were in decline, due in part to industry changes, globalization, and stronger environmental policies. In their place, a new economy was emerging. Some communities were experiencing an increase in tourism and recreation. Other communities saw their populations grow and economies diversify due to cheap land and labor and their proximity to major consumer markets. In some instances, these communities also drew retirees seeking a lower cost of living and a higher quality of life. While these changes presented new economic opportunities, they also had profound impacts on communities. Farmlands and wildlife habitat were being converted to new homes. New industries and residents were placing additional demands on scarce water resources. Parks and other protected areas were struggling to deal with the impact of increased recreation and visitation. These realizations required a new level of collaboration to achieve lasting conservation outcomes, including new partnerships that involve groups that were at odds with the conservation community. These included park and protected area managers, developers, farmers and ranchers, and local elected officials. It also meant that sometimes conservation might take a back seat to other priorities defined by communities and their partners. Communities might decide that economic development or social issues needed to be addressed before creating a new park or protected area. The Sonoran Institute came onto the scene in 1990. Drawing from conservation lessons globally, particularly in Latin America, it sought a new approach to conservation defined by three hallmarks. One was that communities needed to be at the center of conservation. Traditionally, conservation work was done through lobbying, litigation, and federal and state administrative actions. Communities were at best an afterthought. Sonoran Institute looked to make communities the beneficiaries and custodians of conservation, which might lead to more enduring results. Second was an acceptance that change was inevitable. Embracing change meant engaging a broader cross-section of stakeholders in a civil conversation, defining shared values, and agreeing on action where there was common ground. Sonoran Institute believed that investing in these community-building activities was central to achieving successful and sustainable conservation outcomes. Third was the realization that conservation threats respected no boundaries. The traditional approach to conservation focused on creating new parks and protected areas and stopping harmful activities on these lands. But increasingly, scientists were telling us that that wasn't enough, that conservation needed to address threats outside of parks and protected areas, which land managers were ill-equipped to handle. Sonoran Institute was keen to explore new approaches to conservation that cut across protected areas to private landowners, neighboring communities, and in some instances across the U.S. and Mexico. While initially met with skepticism, Sonoran Institute's approach to conservation created results. Consider that over 35 years, Sonoran Institute and its community partners have helped protect more than 500,000 acres of public and private land in the U.S. and Mexico, raised more than $320 million in public and private funds for conservation, established more than 20 organizations dedicated to carrying out local conservation and community priorities, secured and delivered more than 40,000 acre-feet of water for restoration purposes. With these successes, community-based and collaborative conservation has become accepted and adopted by other conservation groups. From the proliferation of community land and water trusts and local organizations dedicated to promoting sustainability, to national environmental groups and government agencies embracing this approach. Much of the credit for this acceptance lies with the Sonoran Institute. The Sonoran Institute's success is due to your support. Many thanks for your contributions over these past 35 years.